Hi everybody, I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie, and together we are ThinkerThemer, and welcome back to our series 10, out of 10, where we are attempting to rate our entire board game collection out of 10, 10 games at a time.
That's correct, yes.
So we've got 10 new games, well not new games, but new games off our shelf.
New to maybe you knowing that we have in our collection, or maybe not.
Maybe not.
You know we have all of them.
Maybe
it's a possibility.
you've studied our collection from behind us.
Or maybe we've covered them before.
But highly unlikely because we have a lot of games in cupboards and hidden all throughout the house. So sometimes even we forget we own them. So this series may never end.
Oh, that's cool.
Anyway, let's get stuck into it with our first game.
All right, the first game is Inkling. Now, Inkling is one of those... Is it technically party? It's more like, it's kind of like semi-party word type game.
It's more of a serious party game though.
It's a contemplative party game because you're kind of doing a lot of
There's a lot of quiet time.
Yeah. But there's some hilarity when at the time of revealing. But we should probably get into how it actually plays so people can follow along.
In Inkling, this is a word game, and you're going to be dealt a hand of cards, 8 cards to begin with, that have different pieces of letters on them. So not whole letters, but you might have 1 or 2 little lines, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to communicate some secret words to the people on your left and right. So you start the game with a card that has a number of words on it, and they're going to be worth more points depending on the length of the word. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to take all these fragments of letters and place them down in front of you in a way that is going to signal to the people on your left and right. You don't really care about everybody else in this game. The people on your left and right, because if they guess correctly the word, you're going to get points. Similarly, if you can guess the words of the person to your left and right, the words that they're constructing, you're going to get points as well. But the most interesting component about this game is the fact that you can orient these cards however you like. You can even turn them over to maybe signal that there's a letter missing in your word. So people have to they have to infer the word based on all of these different shapes. And it's a really interesting way of using your brain. It's completely unlike
because it's
anything
also
else.
And it's quite interesting because you have the stage where you're everyone's putting together their word, and it's almost like that creative. How do I make a sense of this letter with these sort of lines that I have here, and then how you're kind of overlapping cards on top of one another. But then, once you kind of go, I guess that's probably the best I could do. You have the next stage where everyone's kind of like, people are walking around going, what is that? And then inevitably you have someone going, I know what it is. I know what it is. And it can often be some of the people that are not actually
needing to guess
it. But it is such an interesting thing to be like, how, what could the word be? And 2, how did this person think to bring those cards together?
Because, and for example, you might have a card that looks like a C when it's oriented the right way up, but then you might turn it on its side so that it looks like an N, even though it's still got that curvature in it. Or it might, you might try and make it look like
a P
an A or a D. You might add a line to it. So you're trying to construct these letters. And the most fun element of this is certainly not in the scoring and the who wins at the end. This is a game that's a little bit like a Just One that you're playing, and it's really the process of the game. And as Maggie said, usually people are standing on their feet and walking around and being like, oh, that is so clever. I see what you've done here. I get the word, while other people are like, I can't get it. And I need to get it for points. And as the game goes on, you get given more and more cards. And so you've got opportunity to, hopefully let everyone guess your words. And the other thing is you can do like a crossword effect as well. So you can attempt to try and get them to guess 2 words in one round. So if you're really clever, you can do things like that. And this has just been such a hit everywhere I've taken it. I've taken it to work, I've taken it to family events. And this is a game that's like a bit like bananagrams. Like if you've got friends that really love word games, this is a real sleeper hit, I think. So I've really enjoyed my time with that.
Ratings.
I gave it a 7.5, not particularly because I love word games, but because of the joy that this game brings, it's really easy to understand. Everyone knows how to construct a word, but then when you've got all these weird shapes, you're like, how am I going to do this? And then when they start to get it, like everyone just has such a good time. So it's a really nice icebreaker as well. It's a little bit quiet around the table, so it's not a loud party game, but if you've got a group of especially like parents or intergenerational kind of gaming group, Inkling is a great one.
Yeah. My rating is lower. My rating is a 6.7, and the reason it's lower is because I don't like board games, and I don't like fun, so I don't like anything. But this is not really like a rowdy sort of, So I don't mind.
It's an intellectuals party game.
Yeah, which is fun. I like that, but I just don't like word games, so I don't tend to resonate as much. And I find I would much rather like kind of glance over the table when people are playing than actually sit down and play a game.
You like the guessing part.
I enjoy the guessing part, but I don't. For some reason, I don't actually. Yeah, and it almost feels like for me, because I don't resonate with that, it's like it feels like a bit long when I'm playing it. So, yeah.
Maggie might move it on, but I'm going to be clinging onto it, and there's no way it's leaving the collection. So that
Inkling.
is Inkling. The next game, we're going to talk about two games from the same series of games. The first one is Streets. So Streets is a fairly light game. It's a game in this same series as Villages. Villages was the original one, and now there's Streets, and I believe the next one is Moon, which we don't own. But Streets is a tile placement game where you are going to be on your turn placing out part of the neighborhood. So you're building out streets, and on these streets there are different types of buildings, and these buildings, which are like coffee shops or boutiques, they're going to attract different types of people. And so you've got all of these different colored meeples that are going to be attracted to particular stores, but then also when you place a tile, you technically can place an ownership token on that tile, and then you own that, and it has a unique scoring condition, but it's not going to score until someone ends the street. And once the street is ended, everybody that has a tile on that street is going to get some kind of points. And then the really fun thing is, once the street has been scored, all of the meeples that are on that street are going to head off to the nearest location that they enjoy.
Yeah, because it's as if they've closed this street. All the shops have closed. Like, I need to go to the next shop. And there's just like a, what do you call it? Like, instead of bar hopping, shop hopping, I guess. I don't know. But then it's like, so then it becomes this whole thing of like, how do I make sure that my buildings are the ones that all these people are gonna, want to come to next?
And that is really fun because there's something super satisfying about being like, well, I've got the next closest of that type of the coffee shop, and all the hipsters are going to come over to my coffee shop once that street's scored. Or you can see that everybody has a lot going on a street, and you're like, well, I want to get in on the action because when that street scores, I want to get points as well. There's also a little bit of an advanced variant that you can add in, or an additional level of complexity, where there are these tokens associated with different unique types of buildings, and they are going to be a bit of a set collection game. So the person who has the majority of each type is going to get points, and you also get points for collecting a diversity of tokens as well. So I think it's a really cute little filler game. It is quite light, so it's really easy to get into, but it's also really intuitive to teach because people understand building streets, and they understand how different types of meeples are going to come and enjoy
it's
those.
Cute and adorable, and it's like you're like, oh yeah, okay, so I need this. This building is going to score with this type of meeples on it, and so you're looking around, and you're like, oh, there's actually already quite a number of those type of meeples, or quite a number of those types of buildings, because all this, I think, so much variety in all those tiles and all the scoring abilities. I really enjoy it. It's one of those. It's light, but it's satisfying every time.
So I gave this a 7.1. It's a little bit light for my taste. I'd be happy to play it, but I often don't find myself pulling it out to teach it. I don't know why that is, or just maybe because it's a little bit light for my taste, and it's kind of it's complex enough to take a little bit of time, so it does feel like a meaty enough experience, but not quite enough depth for me.
I gave it a 7.8 because I do really I'm double checking. I have that is like your wow made me second guess myself. But no. But because I really enjoy, I just feel really good. Like, I feel really nice when I'm playing it. But I agree, it sort of sits in a strange little place where it's like, it's light enough that you could kind of use it as a warm up, but it's a bit long.
Yes,
Like
yeah.
so you wouldn't really want to use it as an icebreaker because it's kind of like this is going to take up probably 30% of your gaming capacity kind of thing of a gaming night. So
Yes.
so you so it's in a it's
It's
almost
a strange place that doesn't get to the table very often, but I will say that, and I wonder if this is part of why you give it a high score, is because aesthetically,
I really like
it
the
is
aesthetic.
stunning.
Yeah,
and
it's
so when
really-
you put it on the table, it just looks so compelling. So, and I love games that have a table presence like that because
and
especially
tactile.
for new gamers.
So many components are like these beautiful little wooden tokens, and so it's like
And we have the edition with the screen printed meeples as well. So it's all really beautiful, this production. And it's just like a cute little box that sits unusually on the shelf. So that is Streets. And while we're talking about these games, we might as well talk next about Villages. So Villages came before Streets, and Villages is a much, much meatier experience, as in it is heavier to get into. It's a little bit heavier to understand. But what you're doing in Villages is you are drafting different types of villages that belong to different coloured suits in the game. But what's interesting about this game...
Or professions. Colour
suits, professions.
It's the villages.
Yeah, thematically. Thematically, they are different types of professions, and you are going to be building out a tableau in front of you. And the reason why you're trying to build out this tableau is because primarily you're trying to make income, because in this game, money are the victory points. But what's really interesting about this game is you're going to be drafting from a market, or you can draft blind based on just the profession or the suit of card. And then you're going to be playing them in front of you. But the more powerful, interesting cards that are going to give you more income generally, those cards have conditions.
Like dependencies.
Dependencies.
Yeah. Your villagers need to have gotten to a certain place. So you need to have the synergistically companion type villagers already there so that card can be played. Yeah.
That's right. So if you're building, for example, in the kind of mining ore type industry profession, you're going to have a miner first, which is the most basic form of that profession. And then you're going to be like building up from there with more and more specialized villages. And so you've got to create like this chain of villages, which means that you're constantly looking for the next in that chain and you're trying to draft that. But also there's another interesting tableau effect that you can also draft cards that have the ability to unlock your to enable you to draft more cards or play more cards on your turn too. So you're trying to build up that element of your tableau as well. And I just really think that it's quite a crunchy game.
Absolutely.
You and I have really enjoyed playing this at 2. I've never won.
I love this game partly because of that,
Partly because of that. I don't know what it is about it. I just can't get the efficiencies in it.
It just makes so much sense to me. Like, I do feel like you start out such a humble group of, like such a humble village. And then over time, you're kind of, all these people come in and they're upskilling. And then you've got this sort of thriving, mini economy going on. And I just love it. I just love and kind of going, oh, I really want, that particular profession, but I'm going to have to, I need to get this first. And so it gives you, you can kind of start striving towards particular things, but then at the same time, you're having to kind of pivot sometimes. So I just have a great time with it, and it feels really chunky.
It does, and it's there's a lot of cards, takes up a bit of table space.
It does,
We have the play mat, so that is actually really helpful, keeping everything in its place. We also have the little expansion, Shifting Seasons, which introduces like public events, which That's really
cool,
enjoy as
it's
well.
Like different kind of like a season event at the end of every season, or this sort of believe it. It just adds another layer of like, ooh, something else that's kind of happening.
And so what did you rate Villages?
Villages considerably higher than Streets. It's a 8.7 for me.
8.7?
Yeah.
That is outrageous.
I really enjoy this game.
But you're never like, let's have a game of Villages.
That's true, but it's like I've played this solo. I actually really enjoy this solo as well. I'm going to say I haven't brought it out to the table solo recently either, but to be fair, it's like we always have so many games. It's more of a lack of time than it is a lack of but it's one of those games that whenever I kind of glance at it, like it catches my eye. I'm like, oh, Villages.
Just a warm feeling.
I really enjoy it. And like
the artwork is amazing as well.
Well, I actually like it's a quirky aesthetic. So it's like I'm not gonna say it's like gorgeous artwork, but it's like it's quirky and it's colorful, and so it kind of draws me in. But there's something that is like a little bit odd about it.
I like it.
Yeah, I like it as well. But I'm not like, oh my gosh, I just want to like decorate my whole house in prints of this. Which I will, like there are other games that I do have that kind of sense for. But I really enjoy this game.
There you go. Yeah, there is a solo mode. I believe there's actually
a couple of
different.
Solo modes.
The Countess is that. I think that's
and there's
the most recent.
I can't remember the names. I remember there's one that's like the monastery, I think, and then like with the
Yeah, anyway, that is Villages extremely... Did I even say what I rated it? I gave it a 7.4. What did you give it?
An 8.7.
That is a huge gap between us, but it kind of makes sense. This is another game where you're very focused on building up your own tableau, and that tends to be more Maggie's thing than mine.
Yeah.
So that is Villages. Guess that's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Absolutely not.
Maybe one from your side.
All right, so this one is a little game called...
Very little game.
Very little game, but packs a punch. 6 Nimmt.
This is the Japanese edition,
Yes.
which is why it's not titled 6 Nimmt.
Yeah.
But essentially it is the same game inside, and it is language independent, which is
Yes.
why we picked it up in Japan.
If you're able to tell the shape of a bull, you're going to be able to play it. And numbers, you're going to be able to play this game.
Yeah, so in this game, you are playing out into a series of rows, different numbers, and what's interesting is that everybody is going to be simultaneously revealing the number that they want to play from their hand, and then you're going to be allocating that card to the end of one of the rows based on the closest card in ascending order. So your card will be placed as close as possible to... If there's a gap of 3 numbers in one and there's a gap of 10 numbers in the other, then you're putting it on the row with the smallest gap, if that makes sense. But the difficulty in this game is that if you get to 6 cards, or basically if the row is full with 5 cards and your card would be the next...
Yeah, the 6th.
The 6th, well, then you're in trouble because you have to take the entire row, and you do not want to do that because they are point to the end of the game and you want to be as low in points as possible in this game. But there's a few little things here. When you reveal your cards, they're going to be placed in order from the lowest card to the highest card with everybody around the table. So that gap that you thought you were filling in one of the rows has now just been filled by someone else's card, and now you're the 6th card, and what a disaster. Now you have to take that row.
Or you end up having to be moved to another row that now,
Or by the same token, you thought you were going to be the 6th card in a row, and then someone just happens to fill the one card that fits in the gap, and they take that row,
and you're like, sweet, I have a free ride now.
So this game is all about the chaos that ensues depending on what everybody else puts out into the game.
Extremely abstract. There is absolutely no theme in this. I don't think they've
sure
even tried. I don't even know why there's bulls on it, because the cards have these little bull icons, and that's actually going to be the points. It's not the number of the card that's going to be the points or negative points. It's the bulls that are kind of drawn on each card, and so that's the other thing. Like that other element of like you're looking at a row going, oh, there's so many bulls on that.
Yeah, some cards have lots of bulls on them, and so you're like, okay, I'm going to not try and take that row in particular. And sometimes you've got no choice but to take a row, so you take the least painful row. But it is a really fun, chaotic game.
So clever, so quick to teach, like such a low rules overhead. But the actual dynamics on the table are always so, like, I find them so amusing.
Yeah, and it says it plays 2 to 10 people. I would not be playing it with that many people.
I feel like the highest we've played it, I've played it, is maybe like 7?
Yeah, I think it's like 2 at either extreme. At 2 people or 3 people, it's just not enough for it to have that same feel. Whereas at too many people, it becomes so chaotic that you can't actually predict what's going to happen. So maybe like 5 is the ideal player count for this one. But I really enjoy it. I enjoy it even more because I play on BGA, the advanced variant, which places cards, to the left and right of the row cards. Anyway, based on the card game, really enjoy this game. I gave it a 7.9.
Oh my goodness, I gave it exactly a 7.9 as well. So we agree. Which is actually, I feel, quite high for me as a...
Because it's very abstract.
It's very abstract.
Yeah.
But I actually have such a fun fun time whenever I play it. And also, it's like sometimes you can feel like, oh, this is just luck, the cards that you get. But there definitely is strategy.
There's definitely strategy, in terms of the order that you play cards.
I haven't been able to figure out like with the regular game. Yeah, it's like and it's like I forget in between games, and then you start playing it, and you're like, oh, that's right.
I'm making all the same mistakes.
Yeah, this is the strategy. With the advanced variant where you're putting cards on the left and right, I have no idea what the strategy is with that one. Like, I'm completely lost. But
great game.
Anyways, that's 6 Nimmt.
Little game, 6 Nimmt.
Packs a punch.
Yeah, the next game is a game called Stay Cool, and this is very firmly in that party style game, in that it's a little bit lighter, a little bit more accessible, but it is very intense in its stress levels.
Very stressful.
It's super stressful. Yeah. And the reason why is because when the game is focused on you, when it's your turn, you are going to be bombarded with questions from the person on the left of you and the person to the right of you. One person is going to be asking you questions that you have to answer verbally. Pretty easy if that was all that you were doing.
Usually fairly straightforward questions. They're not
that
like something, not some obscure trivia that you're like, oh, I have no idea.
No, you're just going to be answering questions. But then the other person is going to be firing questions at you that you are going to be answering via a series of dice that you have that have letters on them. So you're going to have to spell out the answer at the same time as listening to other questions and answering them verbally. And that is so hard.
It's like a great example of how like multitasking.
It's like rubbing your stomach and tapping your head.
Context switching is quite like, the brain is an incredible thing, but it really struggles to try and do like two things at once.
And then on top of that, there's a sand timer, and another person who's not asking questions in the game is going to be, at first in control of turning that timer over. And I think you get 4 turns of the sand timer to begin with, and you've got to answer as many questions as you can. However, in the next round of the game, that sand timer is only going to flip if you say, flip the sand timer. And that means that you're now answering questions on the dice, looking down, trying to do the spelling. You're trying to verbally answer the question. And you're checking to make sure that 30 seconds hasn't gone by and that time has run out, because if it does, that's the end of your turn. So you need to be like, flip the timer. And then, if that wasn't enough, in the final round of this game, you have to say flip the sand timer, but you can no longer see the sand timer. So you're going to put the sand timer behind the box so that the person
so you have to just keep mental track of what
you think 30 seconds looks
the
like.
sense of time is, while your brain is trying to juggle these other things.
And if it runs out again, your turn is over. And also you could think, oh, I must have gone through 30 seconds already because I'm under so much stress. And you like flip the sand timer, and you actually had way more time left to do that, and so you're cutting your whole turn short. So really fascinating game. It definitely, some people are just so good at this, and it is incredible. I took this to work again, and some people just naturally have that multitasking ability, and other people just collapse in a heap. I think I'm
just like
somewhere in the middle,
glitching out.
Just like what? I can't do anything, and just like stop doing anything completely. But it's a super fun game. It's definitely a lighter experience that kind of it get like, you wouldn't play back-to-back games of this. It's just something to bring the energy in. I gave it a 7.3, mainly because I use it in that way. After a few rounds, it does start to get a bit tired and you want to move on to something else. But for what it is and its uniqueness, I absolutely love Stay Cool.
This is a very fun game, and we all know how I feel about fun games. Therefore, for me, my rating is a little bit lower. Spoiler alert. It's a 6.6 for me. Because it's very stressful. I
feel like you don't like the spotlight on you either.
I usually don't mind the spotlight, but when it's like stressful spotlight, I no.
When it's like perform while everyone stares at you and laughs at your expense.
Collapse.
And it does have that element in it. So, it is really stressful when everybody is like, haha, you can't do 2 things at once. once.
Yeah. Because it's got you're right. It does kind of you're.
It makes you look a bit stupid
potentially, but it's also like as I'm thinking other games like that are really stressful that have timers and things like kites and it's like with that one because it's like the experience is shared, like you're all in this together and it's different to like this.
Everybody
this feels
looking
like
at
this
you.
is not just stressful. There's a lot of pressure on you, and everyone's looking at you and laughing at how your brain can't do these very simple things just when you're having to do them at the same time.
But hilarious game.
It's hilarious.
That is Stay Cool.
Okay. So we're going
next, yeah.
All right, the next game is Tapestry. Yeah, biggie. So Tapestry, in Tapestry we are building our own civilization. So we all start with asymmetric, very different, unique civilizations. And there's a couple of things going on. Obviously, we're getting to decide what levers, what tracks we're going to be evolving in. Are we going to go, science heavy? Are we going to be more like a war combat type heavy? And all of those things are going to be giving you different abilities along the way, or different ways of kind of scoring different things. So one of the things that kind of happen is you're going to be on your board, you're going to be relieving or opening up spaces from your buildings. So some of these buildings are going to get unlocked, which then starts being built onto your tapestry, I guess, your polyomino little map. Where you're going to be kind of adding those little buildings and also adding, if you reach particular milestones that unlock the actual full polyomino shape type buildings, that also kind of comes into the map. So that becomes its own little puzzle of how do I kind of see my civilization or my city kind of come to life. The other thing is those little buildings that you've been lifting from your board, they're going to be giving you income or different ways of getting bonuses along the way. So this is a very convoluted way of saying you're essentially going to be building your civilization with a whole heap of different ways. And then there's also your tapestry cards, which are again going to be add another element, thematic element or flavor to the whole experience.
Flavor, but this game is not that thematic. So I would say this game is, I think when we reviewed this game, I referred to it as multiplayer Gashon clever because this game is all about comboing. And so on your
synergies
turn,
as well.
Yeah, on your turn, the only thing you do is you move one of your markers up one of the 4 tracks, and that's it. So the rules overhead for this game is fairly straightforward. It's really quick to teach, but as you peel back the layers of this game, you realize that it's not that simple because you've got to think about the timing of when to go up each one of those tracks, because they give you actions and bonuses that often give you other resources that you can then use to move up further on another track. So it's all about thinking about how to optimize the combos to allow yourself to get more things done, because the interesting thing about this game is you can continue to play turns in a round until you've exhausted all of your resources or until you decide that you want to stop and have an income phase. And so at the end of the game, if you haven't been that efficient with your turns, you could end the game far sooner than any other players, and the rest of the players continue to play. So you might actually finish 20 minutes before everybody else. You've got to go make yourself a cup of tea while they play out the rest of the game, because this game has a very interesting learning curve. That is the most fascinating thing about this game, is that when we first played it, we were like, is that it? And it feels
very
super
simple. Yeah.
I was super underwhelmed by this game. I was like, why do people love this game so much? I don't get it. It's like really straightforward, really simple, and I feel like I'm not achieving much. And then that famous line in the rule book that said a great score is 300.
Like, wait, what?
And we didn't crack 100 in our first game. We're like, what? Like, how is that even possible? And so then, of course, we played it over and over and over and just got better and better at those combos, and then utilizing our asymmetric civilization ability, and then like working with that puzzle, the polyomino puzzle, and just all of the elements and how they come together. And the super satisfying thing about this is just beat your own score. Honestly, that is like, it is like playing a solo gaming company, because because it's like, how do I just get the best score out of this game?
It is. I think that's it. It's like over games. The game starts revealing, or you start discovering the layers of synergies, or how the missed opportunities from previous games, essentially, where you're like, I need to make sure that these things are aligned by the time I do this, so that I can kind of get the most bang for buck. So it is very much about, timing, but also understanding how that timing's going to play out, and then also knowing where you're going to get, like, for example, with the polyomino puzzle, like that can be very hard, and it's like the amount of points that you can get can really vary, and it can feel like not really all that worthwhile. But then it might be combined with a civilization where you're actually getting quite a lot of benefits if you're optimizing some of that. So there is quite a lot of variety and variability, and obviously there's been all the other expansions that have added additional layers. But so I think it's one of those games that on the surface fairly straightforward.
It appears way more simple when you first play it, to the point where you're just like, this is too simple.
Yeah.
But then when you are trying to strive for a score and you realize how hard you have to work to do that in a small number of rounds. I mean, it really starts to reveal itself. The strategy starts to reveal itself. And then after that, because we stuck with it, I really, really started to enjoy this game. So,
So what's your rating?
What did I give it? I gave it a 7.8. For me, really enjoyed it, enjoyed my time with it. It's a game that I would always be happy to sit down and play, a game that I'd be happy to teach. The iconography is so great in this game that it makes it really easy to get into and to understand. And the combat element is very subdued, so it never feels like antagonistic or anything really. But it is still a little bit multiplayer solitaire, aside from the fact that you can unlock the buildings that go on your polyomino tile grid. If you're the first person to go up that track, there's not a lot of interaction. And some of the expansions introduced tapestry cards that were a bit more interactive, but really not super interactive for my tastes.
I give it a 7.8 as well.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
So for me, it's sort of different. I think it's a game that I can appreciate the design of, and I'm like, I enjoy myself when I'm playing it. But it's not higher for me because I think, as you said, it's like, even though I really love the cards, the tapestry cards, like the artwork on those, it overall doesn't feel like a thematic experience.
Not at all.
Even though, in theory, like all the individual components logically kind of make sense, but it just ends up feeling a little bit more like pulling levers and kind of going, and I'm going up this track and this is triggering this other thing, and then
very easily could have been Gashon Clever with just different coloured tracks.
And
it would still feel quite similar.
So I think it's a great. I think it's a really kind of solid core thing, but again, because it doesn't kind of wow you up front, it's almost like that shy person in the corner that you're having to kind of go in there and go, hey. So what are you about? Tell me.
Tell me what you're about.
And then when they get going, you're like, oh, that's actually really interesting. That's really cool. But it's like, it almost kind of makes me work too hard. And so it's one of those things that then when I see it on the shelf, I'm like, oh yeah. But I'm not like, because it's sort of being quiet there in the corner, I'm not like, oh, I can't wait to get it back on the table.
I will also say that this is a game that you want to play with other people who are really good at Tapestry.
Yeah.
Because then it feels like an even playing field. If you play with a new player and you are experienced and you're getting a score of 250, you are going to annihilate them. And so for that reason, it's also just, it makes it a bit hard to teach new players unless you're willing to kind of, not sit back and not try very hard to win.
Yeah, I feel like that's a fair point. Like the experience really unevens that playing field.
But what makes it great by that token is you go to a con and there are other players who have played a lot of Tapestry and it's on because, that optimization, who can out-optimize each other is a really fun experience. So that is Tapestry.
All right.
And the next game is a deduction game called Awkward Guess. Now, Awkward Guess is all about Mr. Walton, and Mr. Walton has been murdered.
Whodunit.
It is a whodunit, and there are plenty of suspects. This is a game that
Too many.
is an evolution of what we call in Australia Cluedo. In the US, I believe it's Clue, and other parts of the world. But Awkward Guess is essentially that storyline where you are in charge of an investigation and you are trying to work out whodunit and what their motivation was. And also you are going to have evidence about, the weapons and the rooms that different people were in. And the way that this game works is really interesting because this publisher came up with a term called the Brilliant Deck System. And this deck is a huge pile of clue cards. And when you are setting up this game, either through the rulebook or through the free app that you can download, it's going to give you a case file, and that case file is going to dictate the cards that you pull out of that deck, shuffle them all up, and that becomes the case, and all of the other cards go back in the box. Then you are going to divide cards between players, and on your turn, you are going to be offering up cards to other players, and you're going to be offering up a certain point value of clues, and cards that have a higher point value are more meaty clues that are going to help you deduce, the case much better. And so you're going to offer those up, and people around the table are going to offer to trade with you the same value of cards or more. And so if they trade with you, that means that you're going to take those cards, you choose who you want to trade with, take those cards, and then they're going to give you fresh clues, hopefully. And those fresh clues you're going to be able to mark off on a sheet of paper. So it's kind of like a map of the house that you have, a floor plan, and you also have all of the suspects, all of their motives, the different weapons, and you are trying to mark those off systematically until you feel confident to give a guess at who did it and what their motive was and whether they had an accomplice in some of the harder cases. And this game is really funny because in the trading element, there are lots of mind games that go on with that, because you might not want to trade with the same person too many times because they might start to give you the same cards back and then you're not getting any fresh clues. But if they do that, they're probably going to burn you a little bit and then you're like, I'm not trading with you anymore. You gave me old cards on purpose. You knew I'd had those cards. Those are the cards I gave to you. Or they might end up trading with other people. So you're trying to look at who's trading with who so that you can ensure that you try and get fresh clue cards.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. The other interesting element is that when you try and bury evidence, so you might have a really powerful clue in your hand and you're like, I don't want anybody to know that this entire type of weapon is ruled out. So I'm going to keep that in my hand and not trade it away. And therefore people are going to have this missing component to their case. And so you can actually kind of get that buried into a discard pile that will take a while for it to come back into the game. So you can kind of manipulate that. But if you do that, of course, then you have less to trade. So it's this interesting balance of what do I keep to myself versus what do I trade away to get ahead in this game. I tend to err on the side of being too cagey in this game and not willing to give up an important clue, but then I get left behind because I'm not trading as much. There's also a bit of a king or queen making effect, or the reverse of that, where people might not trade with someone if they're perceived to be ahead.
You get shunned by the table.
So there is that little element. But all in all, I just really enjoy this. Oh, the other thing I love about this game is when you do want to guess, everybody at the same time reveals a token at the end of the round to say whether they want to have a guess or not. And if you do, you get to input your guess into the app. So the app knows which case you're playing and therefore it knows the answer. You put in your answer, and if you get it wrong, instead of being out of the game like in Clue or Cluedo where you have to open the envelope and it's all over, it will just go wow, 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 which of course is hilarious because everybody knows that you got it wrong.
And a relief to everyone else around the table.
But it just means that you don't get to guess in the next round. So it sets you back, but it doesn't mean you're eliminated out of the game, which I really like.
I think it's an extremely clever way of implementing a very well-known, well-loved thematic thing of the whodunit and the deduction thing. I find that I'm so bad at this. Like I'm too trusting. I'm not really invested in keeping track of so I will end up trading clues with the same people and go, I already knew this, but not even realizing that I already knew it until I go to mark it down. I'm like, I already so it's like I am not this is not kind of like how my brain sort of thinks. But I do find that for some reason, it's like I do enjoy that element of the swapping of the clues, like just the kind of going, how many points I've got, like how valuable this is, and that conversation that starts of going, ooh, I've got this, it's really juicy, but it's like you can have the same value, I can have like 5 points worth of evidence, but it's like it's all in like like very low value cards, which are not going to help you narrow in or narrow down on anything. Or it's like, no, I've got that same amount, but it's only like in 2 cards. It's like, ooh, those are going to be 2 very
Powerful
juicy cards.
Yeah.
But again, it might be ones that you already know. And so I think like that element is interesting. I feel like it can go for a little bit long sometimes.
Yeah,
like the games.
I do want to talk about player count. This game plays up to 8, and I would highly recommend never playing it at that level.
It gets to a point where everyone's just
drags
like tired
on.
and like...
Yeah, it's actually quite a long game as it is. Obviously, if people are better at the game, it can end quicker. But it is more of that 4 to 5 players is ideal. Once it blows out to like 6 or 7, it just becomes a very slow game. And people who aren't being traded with feel like they're not getting, much opportunity to progress in the puzzle. So definitely... Yeah, and it's equally at a lower player count, it's not as good either. So this is kind of sits in that 4 or 5. It was such a favorite game of mine for a long time, and it's certainly very high up there in terms of deduction game. There's something about the nostalgic feel of Clue or Cluedo that allows people to get into it really quickly.
Very quickly,
And then the deduction puzzle is actually really fun. I really enjoy, marking off my sheet or coming up with creative ways to mark what's going on.
It's one of those ones that I always find that it's like, this is so hard. It's like when someone's like, okay, I think I'm ready to guess. I'm like, how? I've not narrowed down anything. But anyways, what rating would you give?
I gave it an 8.3.
Wow.
At one point in time, this would have made my top 10. I'm not sure that it will anymore. Probably because we played it out a little bit. Like I feel like we've played it over and over. And I don't know. I'm not finding that it gets off the shelf as frequently. The artwork is a choice as well. So
because it's got that like monochrome, sort of film noir feel to it.
Yeah,
but
which
I cartoons.
I really like. But compared to all of the deluxeified games that our friends are most interested in getting to the table, maybe it's a little more subdued than that. But I just even talking about it, I'm like, what a great game! Like I really had a great time with this one.
I immediately forgot what was it? For me, it's a bit lower because also I'm not really huge into deduction games, so it's a 7.6 for me.
Still fairly.
It's
high.
still I still think it's a solid game. I will always play this over a Clue or Cluedo. it's way more engaging for me. But I do find that it's like I enjoy the first act of it, and then as it kind of gets to the middle of the game and towards the end, it's like I start kind of losing a little bit of steam because it's like. Partly because I'm so bad at it, because I'm like, I have no idea how people are narrowing things down and already like trying to have guesses and stuff, and I'm like,
what I love is that we played this with our police officer friend, and he beat us
he was
so
very good.
quickly, and it was like
reassuring to know that
there you go. I mean, I guess
he was good at the whole like deducing and
it was amazing. So that's awkward guess.
Okay.
Now the next
over
game, over here.
So we're going into a little tiny game called Wonderland's War.
Oh my goodness!
It's so heavy.
It's so heavy.
This is the deluxe
this
edition
is the deluxe
as well,
edition,
with
which
all
has
the beautiful
premium chips in it.
Yeah, mega chips.
Yeah.
Wonderland's War is actually got a bit of a. This was an Easter egg in a previous episode where we were talking about. Push your luck type games, and I said there was one that I particularly love, and I put it out to people, go, have some guesses and see, if anyone can guess, and some people did. It is Wonderland's War. So in Wonderland's War, we're playing as Wonderlandians in the Alice in Wonderland world, where for some reason Wonderland has kind of fallen into this, like it's lost all its whimsy and its sort of magicalness, and so now as the different Wonderlandians, so you might be, the Queen of Hearts, or you might be Alice, or so you're going to, or the Mad Hatter, and so you're going to try and ultimately gain the most support or win and to get the most points and support to then become the new ruler of Wonderland, so that you can then kind of shape Wonderland to whatever you feel Wonderland should be, which is ultimately what always happens when you have people fighting for power and control. But the way you're going to do this is you always start out with this, the tea party. So you're going around the tea party and you have all these different cards. And so where you end up landing is kind of like the card and the abilities that you'll be able to gain for that round. So those cards can be things like quests. So that's going to be particular, almost like a set of circumstances for the subsequent battles that are going to happen. Or they can be things like, what are some of the other things that you get? Oh yeah, you can get more chips. So to start building your bag, because ultimately it's all going to be all those subsequent battles that are going to be ensuing across the different locations of Wonderland are going to be determined by drawing chips out of a bag. And the power of those chips is going to kind of determine how your progress in that battle, I guess, whoever you're kind of dealing with. So so you're getting...
So the tea party is really a preparation phase.
Yes,
the game is played in 2 phases. It's preparation at the tea party and then battles in different locations in Wonderland. So it's all about preparation, getting quests which are objectives, you're getting chips.
You're getting other Wonderlandians that
give you special powers.
And unique abilities as well.
But importantly, it also gives you on a lot of the cards, there's a little meeple figure that has a number in it. And that number is going to determine how many supporters you take from your supply and add to an area of your choice. Yeah. And that is going to help you build up strength in those particular zones. Actually, they don't, not strength, but kind of like life points, shall we say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then when the battle starts, we're going to go region by region and look at how many pieces each person has in there and their strength value. And then there's a strength or battle tracker that is going to dictate where everybody starts on that tracker. And then we're all going to be drawing into our bag, as Maggie said, and simultaneously revealing the chip that we've pulled. And that chip is going to generally have a value on it. So that's going to push you up that battle track because you're trying to be the person who gets the furthest along that track without going bust, or gets right to the end of it to immediately win. And so at any point, you can opt to hold or stay and just hope that you're the person furthest along. And if someone has kind of decided to opt out and they're at a quite high value, you might want to keep pushing your luck to see if you can overtake them. But the problem is that in your bag, you've got these like the madness tokens. And what you don't want to be doing is pulling those out because they're going to chip away at this kind of madness. Chip away.
So silly.
At this madness track. Yeah. And once, if you kind of go bust on that, well, then you're completely out of the battle. But the good thing about going bust is that it's going to allow you to take all of the exhausted chips from this battle and previous battles and kind of put them back into your bag. So in a way, going bust can help you because if you don't go bust, every subsequent battle is going to get harder and harder because you've pulled out all of the good chips.
You have a really crappy bag now. Like really depleted resources.
Yes. So this game is all about trying to mitigate against the luck of the draw by really setting yourself up for success, by filling your bag up with really powerful chips to dilute the madness that goes into there. But the other elements is the shards of madness, which is when you're drafting cards, sometimes you can get shards of madness, and if you get too many of those, it's going to add more madness into your bag. So it's really a balance of all of those things.
But I also love, like, with some of those chips, as you're building your bag, they have unique abilities. So they might allow you to play additional chips or double the value of something, or, you know, damage something that your opponent in that battle is doing, or and my favorite thing of all, the quests. So the quests means that then you have kind of these unique goals and objectives that apply kind of just to you, where you're like, okay, you know, a quest might be to in a battle, so they're all usually linked to particular locations. So in this location, so now you're like, okay, well, now I'm invested in going there and having some kind of presence there. In this location, make sure that you finish with, it might be a combination of chips on your board, it might be a particular number on the track. So you may actually be going into that battle with no intention of winning, but there with a very specific set of circumstances to like align, variables to align. And I love that. The other thing is that with the quest, they have 2 parts. They have like a top part, and you can kind of do either of them independently, but if you complete both of them, you get even more points. And so it just, that's the bit that to me, like something that is like the the push your luck element is always very fun because you're always going around the table and even if it's not your battle, you're kind of invested because you're like, oh, what happened? And also you can do a wager thing where you can kind of bet on who's going to win
if
that
you're not
battle.
involved.
If you're not involved, if you're not involved in that.
Yeah, so which keeps everybody entertained as to how it's going to play
out.
Even
if you don't, I find that it's like it can be quite interesting to be like, oh, this person's like, what's going to come out? Because you yourself don't know what's going to come out unless you're cheating with your bag and where you're putting. But that's one of those like issues with bag building sort of stuff.
I would say I'm terrible at this game. Maggie always goes quest strong and wins, whereas I tend to push my luck too far because I'm very involved with wanting to win the battle.
Yeah,
whereas
your competitive drive just won't let you.
I want to win a battle, and Maggie wants to win the war. And
I don't even want to win the war. I'm just in it for the quests. I just want to like
you're going on your little side quests,
little things. Yeah.
So this was a big hit for us. Yes. I gave it an 8.1. I really enjoy it. It took now I've completely lost the bag builder.
Quacks of Quedlinburg.
Which is a game that I enjoy but don't at all feel the need to own.
We don't even own it.
No, this one brings so many more layers of strategy. It gives different avenues of getting points. I love the trade-off of getting the Shards of Madness versus more powerful cards that are going to set you up for success in the battle. And then the area control. I just love area control in games. So thinking about where to place my leader and all of my extra Wonderlandians. Yeah. I just really enjoy that. And the deluxe edition is so beautiful. If you can get your hands on the premium chips, it just adds to the tactileness of, a bag builder, which is really, really amazing, and everybody loves that element of the game.
The artwork, the aesthetic of this, the table presence, is like so many things. But I would like, so for example, with Quacks of Quedlinburg, is like, that's a very pure, just like, the push your luck with with chips out of a bag, or not chips, like, because I guess you can upgrade them to the premium chips. And it's very straightforward, and it does that really, really well. So it's like, but then this, like, I think, like, that's a game that we've played. I'm like, this is really interesting, but no part of me actually felt the need to own it, because it actually felt too straightforward. This added so many layers that I like. Okay, I'm gonna reveal it's actually a 9 for me.
Wow.
Like, it's just an incredibly, I absolutely
that might end up in your top 10.
Potentially. I absolutely love every time I play this game. Warning, it does go for quite a long time. These are not,
That's what held it back for me. That's what held it back for me, especially at a full player count of 5. This is an exceptionally long game. Too long. I actually think it is too long. I agree. Yeah. Even at 4, I would say it's too long.
3 is probably the magic.
And
magic number.
Yeah, I enjoyed it most at 3 probably, and also what was I going to say? Something else about not just the length. Oh, there's a few fiddly rules around the battle, and I do find myself having to refer to what is quite a complex reference sheet. And so
it's a very overwhelming flowchart.
There's a flowchart in it.
But then it actually, once you know what you're doing, it actually makes sense.
Yeah, but I do feel like every time I get it out, I've kind of got to go through that process of remembering just like the side cases of how that kind of all works. So for me, that's what suppresses the score a little bit, but 8.1 is still a very high score. And so I guess this is staying
so much. I'm going to put this out there again. Like, I love this game so much that I wish it had a solo, because I would set this up on the table, and it takes a while.
Huge.
I would set this up on the table to play it solo if there were a way to play it solo, which I'm sure, there's going to be ways. Just don't make it a very complicated AI. Like, make it something, fun, easy, straightforward, and give me even more quests, like more challenges and things.
More challenges.
I'll be gone for hours and hours.
Well, you know what? I haven't looked at, there were some slight tweaks made to the game in the latest Kickstarter edition. I don't know if solo was one of them, but certainly there was some fixing of a couple of factions that were OP'd. So have a read further about that. We haven't really delved into that too much. So that's Wonderland's War. On to the next game is a little game that came out recently called Whirling Witchcraft.
Whirling Witchcraft. We are witches.
Sounds like a tongue
Whirling Witch. I love is it alliteration? Well, which is like Whirling Witchcraft, Wonderland's War.
That's the W episode.
Yeah, it is the W episode. Today's brought to you by the letter W. So Whirling Witchcraft, we are playing as witches concocting our different potions, and I'm probably going to get a lot of this terminology wrong because we're not very magic literate. But you're concocting your potion. Interestingly, the whole purpose of doing this, we're a very kind of communal witch group or circle, I think is the term. And so when you're concocting your potion, what you're doing is you're actually handing that over to your fellow witch, usually on the right, who's then going to have to
be changes direction.
Oh yeah, it can change direction. Who then is going to have to take that and figure out what they're going to do with all of those different ingredients. So you actually have a very cute little cardboard cauldron where you're going to...
cauldron is so cute.
Where you're putting your little colored cubes, which are representing the ingredients, and then passing that along. And what determines what gets to be put on that is based on these cards that you're playing that are kind of like your... what would that be? Like spells, I'm imagining? So it's like that determine what ingredients that you have on your board you're going to be able to exchange for other ingredients and then ultimately kind of be putting onto the cauldron. When you're passing that along and the other witch is receiving it, also you're receiving a cauldron that someone else is giving you, you're going to have to put those ingredients back onto your board. And you want to make sure that you're not overcrowding any of the storage spaces for any of those ingredients. Because otherwise it's the equivalent of having, what is it? Like, I guess like your witch cabin overrun with, for example, like the frogs. It's like, well, now this is chaos. So what happens is if I get given a cauldron where now I'm overloaded and I haven't been able to put all of the I have leftover resources of any one type, that now becomes a point. So it's like my potion kind of sort of exploded, or just, I was inconvenienced, and that weirdly becomes a point for the person who overloaded me.
Yeah.
So it becomes this puzzle of both, one, keeping an eye on what's the stuff that I'm going to be receiving, and how can I use that so that I'm not letting myself run out of space.
Yeah.
But also, what engine can I generate to start offloading onto my neighbor?
Next
because
neighbor.
The winner is going to be the first person to get to 5 points. Essentially, the first person to overload their neighbor 5 times the quickest.
Yeah. And so it's a really interesting concept. It's directly competitive because you are actually trying to cause pain to the person next to you by overloading them.
But what a passive-aggressive way of doing it.
It's like, here's a gift for you. Here's a gift.
It's like,
I've got some good things for you this turn. Which is really snarky and hilarious.
Not more spiders. Not just spiders.
It's hilarious. So you're constantly keeping one eye on like what they have on their board, because you're like, ooh, your tracker of that ingredient is not looking good for you, and I'm going to just overload you with that until you break. So it's a really fascinating concept for a game. Generally that kind of aggression, some people will shy away from it, but it doesn't feel too mean because you're doing it to the next person too. So everyone is just trying to deal with what's incoming and then pass on as much pain as possible to the next player. I really like that. There's also some little one-off powers and things that you can trigger. So you can kind of store them up.
Arcana books that, depending, there's like icons on the cards that you play, and then those can move like your progress along your, like, I think it's called Arcana book. And then when you reach particular points, you can trigger these sort of like, unique abilities where, it might allow you to, like the crow, I think it's called, when it comes in and it sort of takes off or like eats off 2 of the ingredients. And so it can help you a little bit along the way, or give you kind of like unique powers.
So my family really enjoyed this game. We actually played it, with my younger brother and with my mum. And so having like a mix of players and it's just a nice family game because it's hilarious in the pain that you're causing your family members or your
like
friends.
The colors, like the aesthetic of it, I really, really enjoy.
I gave Whirling Witchcraft a 7.1, a little bit lower for me just because, still 7.1 is great and it's obviously in our collection for a reason, but the game is a little bit light for me. I like mean games, and so I enjoy that element of overwhelming, but I wish there was a different layer to it somehow, because it does feel like it's a bit one note. It's kind of a little bit one note. You feel like
you play it out. I give it a 7.5. So again, sort of similar, a bit higher than you. I think I really love the aesthetic. I love those little cauldrons and how you physically are able to kind of pass those along. It's fun. But I feel like it's almost like it's over too soon. And I agree that it's you kind of, after playing it a few times, you feel like, oh, maybe it's a bit played out. You do have unique abilities that you can activate, which add another kind of layer of complexity.
For some reason we don't get it off the shelf. So we played it a lot when we first got it, and I'm not sure it has the right occasion. It kind of does sit in that weird place again where it's like a little bit a bit too much to teach for for the strategy payoff.
Yeah.
But it is like a fun, unusual game. So I don't know if we'll keep this. It's because it's really unique.
It's so beautiful. I actually
And
really
you
love
love
the
the
aesthetic.
artwork,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's a tricky one.
Isn't this an artist that you really enjoy?
Yes. I can't remember the name. What's the name of the artist? It's not actually AEG do this thing where they don't put the names of the artist on the box, but it's the same artist, I believe. It's the same. Yeah, it's not on the box, but it's the same artist as the Bloody Inn, which actually, it's one of those games that we'll have to include it.
Rate that one.
Same aesthetic, and I love that aesthetic. It's like kind of what's the word? It's almost like grotesque, but also like quite beautiful, like the saturated colors
and the shapes and bright colors.
I love that.
It is really cute.
Anyways, so that's Whirling
Witchcraft, and the last game that we're going to talk about in today's episode.
That it doesn't go everywhere. I don't know if we'll even be able to fit it in the full screen. Oh yeah, there we go.
There we go. Is roads and boats. And I'm going to put this back down again because it's going to be disaster. Roads and Boats is the first game that we've featured in this series by Splotter. Splotter is the publisher. Splotter is well known for games that are quite, let's say, if you don't play well, you're in trouble because you can get left behind very quickly and then spend the rest of the game being what's called splotted, which means basically sitting out knowing that you probably have no hope of coming back. You need to start strong in a lot of Splotter games.
Yeah.
Now, Roads and Boats is a really, really old game. This game was brought out, this particular edition was brought out to kind of bring some newness into it. There's an expansion that we never play with, but this new edition is really still the same style of artwork and the most ridiculous. Like, it's just, this game is aesthetically not pleasing.
But in that, it's like kids' drawings. And because of that, I actually love it. Like,
it's
I actually
awkward,
have fallen in love with the aesthetic.
It's weird. But I want to explain what this game is about, because in this game, you are in charge of setting up I would say it's a civ building game that is not focused on economy or building. It's focused on one thing squarely, and that is transportation.
Yeah.
And you're going to start the game with a humble donkey, a couple of geese, and some wood and a stone. And that's all you have in your budding transport business to begin with. And so, of course, you can't get much done at the beginning of the game. You are moving very slowly with a donkey from hex to hex on this board that is covered in different types of terrain.
Yeah.
And you're just going to be moving around. And what you want to do is you want to build up some buildings. And these buildings are going to help you generate resources and get things done. And eventually, over the course of this game, you're going to have this thriving civilization that has all these different types of buildings that can help you build things like other types of transportation to get around. So eventually, you're going to start having different modes of transport and the ability to build roads across this terrain in order to get around much faster and to different areas of the board. And that's important because you can only build certain types of buildings in certain areas.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if you want to build a mine, that can only go out in the mountains, and that might be very far away from where you've started. Interestingly, the most compelling part about this game, and the reason why this game has been in our collection and we're so fond of it, is because everything is shared in this game.
You don't
own anything aside,
unless it's on your mode of transportation.
Yes.
So if it's on your donkey or if it's on your truck, then that's yours for now.
Yes.
While
So
you have it.
aside from your transportation devices, you don't own anything. So when you build a building and that building generates resources, any opponent can come in and grab those resources and run away with them, or in the case of donkey, move very slowly away with them. And then they want to bring them back in order to take them to one of their buildings in order to transform it into a different type of resource. So this game is all about taking base resources, building them up to, perhaps build a building. That building is going to help you increase the type of resource to a more powerful resource.
Sequence of manufacture sort of thing. Yeah.
And it's an efficiency puzzle. So the person who can do that in the most efficient way is probably going to win this game. But the other thing is fending off opponents. So You don't want them to come in and nab your stuff.
Take your stuff. Even though it's not technically your stuff, but you feel invested because it's like, well,
because you've worked so hard to try and build
all the capital to build that particular like factory or thing that's now generating that, and you just get to, you know, rock up and show up and take the stuff.
The other thing is that, for example, in one game I had built a set of mines, or I always try and build a mine because they generate lots of powerful resources that are worth a lot of money in the game, a lot of victory points. And you know, you can only transport so much on the back of certain types of vehicles. And so you get caught in this, okay, I'll travel all the way out to my mines, I'll load up my donkey, and now my donkey is moving slowly back, but there's another resource that's being generated by that mine, and now it's out there, and Maggie's going to get there quicker than I am.
Yeah.
And she comes in from the rivers with her raft and like just goes straight across the rivers and picks up the stuff from my mine, infuriating. And so
not your mine. So it's just the mine.
Other part of this game is you can build walls. You can build walls to keep your neighbors away from your stuff, and that is hilarious as well, because someone is building up a series of roads to come in and get your stuff, and you put a wall there and they've got to break down that wall using resources. But I've really buried the lead in a way, because this game comes with perspex.
Like a perspex sheet.
A perspex sheet
over the top of all the hex tiles.
That's
the map.
It's just so ridiculous.
And you
this game.
use a marker to draw things on, and like that's how you're kind of drawing the roads.
That's you're drawing the network, which is really clever in a way, and really hilarious, like when it reminds me of the old overhead projectors that we had at school. But you're setting up a map which can vary in terms of its difficulty and the starting positions of players and how hard it is going to get.
The combination of availability of terrains.
And then that perspex sheet just sits on top of the map, and you're drawing on it, and
it's such a mess. And then there's so many little cardboard bits like all over the place, but it's a beautiful mess.
It is. And this game, there's nothing aesthetically pleasing about it. It's weird, quirky. It's also really fiddly, which is something that I hate about games, is okay, now I'm going to exchange this resource for this and that and this. But the vibe of this game is worth it.
Absolutely.
And so there's just something so hilarious about when Maggie and I play this 2 players, and you just see that donkey coming from the corner, and like coming over towards your stuff, and you're like,
what are you doing?
What are you doing? You're like, nothing. I'm just hanging out over here.
Just go for a walk.
Yeah.
Exercising my donkey.
Yeah, so I see this game and it just brings back so many fond memories for me. I really, really enjoy it. It is an oddball in our collection, and I gave it an 8.7. So really high. I love the interactivity of the game. I hate when the other thing is the efficiency puzzle is so difficult that if you don't quite get off to a good start, you really do hamper yourself for the rest of the game, because if your other player does that much better and is generating more stuff, that's going to trigger the end game much quicker, and you're in trouble. So I love how punishing it can be. I love how mean it can be, and I just love the quirkiness of drawing on the board.
I completely agree with that. It is a mess, and it's a beautiful mess. And for me, it's a 9.2.
Oh my God.
I am so enamored by this game. It's like the game that,
and you care so much about aesthetics.
It's the game that just does not make sense. You know when you fall in love and you're like, this person should not be my type.
Oh.
Wow, but you're like, you can't help yourself. You just can't. Now you're exactly my type.
I'm the roads and boats of Maggie's life.
No, this is just you're not quite.
So it's like not your type. You just end up with a donkey.
But you love the donkey. You can't help but love the donkey. I'm not calling you a donkey, babe. I think you're.
Anyway,
you're the.
We'll cut this out.
We will not. Anyways, this game has just completely made its way into my heart. All its quirks, all its things that just should be annoying and infuriating.
All of it. And even when we start a new game, we're like, what is like this? This game is a mess. And then you're reading the rule book, which is an awfully laid out rule book, and it's just terrible.
Everything about
it. But then when you're like
a disaster,
halfway through the game, you're like, this is so good.
It's just
so good. So that is Roads and Boats.
That's the end of it.
Wow. There you go. A couple of really highly rated games by Maggie this episode. So for once, so you might end up. So a couple of these might end up in your top 10. I'm excited to see. But if you enjoyed this video, please hit like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we're really looking forward to sharing more of our board game collection with you soon. But otherwise, bye for now. Bye.